Merin. Thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you for having me.
This is going to be so much fun. So I know you so well. You're my dear friend, and this makes this extra special today, being able to talk about all the things with you. You just have this way about you. And for those of you listening who have not yet had the pleasure of meeting Merin, I have you tagged in the show notes so you can follow Merin Coots Consulting on Instagram and Facebook afterwards to learn more about her. But you just have this ability to be able to so clearly see the big picture in businesses and in individuals. And just as my friend, we've just had so many moments over the years where I'm like, wow, you can just read me. What is this magical gift you have? And I am so excited to dive into that today about how you've taken this gift and been able to sort of transpose that into business and life. So you haven't always been a consultant. So let's start from the beginning. How did your background in your career kind of lead you to starting Merin Coots Consulting?
Yeah, it's a long story, but I'll give you the short version. So I did my university education in marketing, minoring in agriculture, going back to my farm roots.
Classic farm girl.
Yeah, classic farm girl. And I worked a lot in media and telecommunications. So up until I jumped into the world of consulting, I worked for the Shaw Communications Network and ran the Saskatchewan operations. And, then our family started growing and, our first child, my husband and I shared our maternity year. When our son was born a few years later, I was selfish and said, no, I think we're only having 2 kids. I'm not sharing this. I want the whole year. But it was also at a time where I wasn't sure what my future was going to look like, because at that point in time, we weren't really willing and able to move and relocate. So I was already kind of starting to think about what is the next chapter of life going to look like for me. And anyways, in the midst of my maternity year, the company did a huge restructuring, and they were very generous at trying to find opportunities for me and, other parts of the business. But long story short, I decided to, leave the company on really great terms and kind of fell into consulting. It really wasn't something I had planned, but while I was on maternity leave, realizing I really wasn't coming off of maternity leave to go back to the job I had previously, fun projects just kept finding me. And
Isn't
so I
it
did
incredible how when you have the space that's not that, let's be honest, maternity leave is not giving us the space here. If only it was the vacation that everybody pretends that it might be.
Right.
But having that space in a sense of other things potentially being able to come your way that nobody would have even thought to approach you about while you were working full time somewhere else, right?
Yeah. I think it gave me the freedom to just dream and ponder and reflect on, the opportunities that came my way. And so that was 11 years ago. My son just turned 11 in November. And so that really kind of marked the beginning of my consulting life. And, I always had the attitude that I'll keep doing this as long as I feel like I can provide value, as long as I'm continuing to learn new things, and as long as the work is fun and enjoyable. And so, here we are 11 years later. And I think what has changed in those 11 years is when I started in consulting, any fun project, I was like, yep, I'm on, let's do this. I'll figure it out. And then, years go by and you realize, oh, this is what I'm really good at. And this is what I really like doing, which means I have to say no to some other stuff to carve out the space to do the stuff that is really in my sweet spot. So I've gotten a lot smarter in the last 11 years at kind of fleshing out the stuff that isn't maybe my jam and the stuff that really is.
That's amazing. And what a process. So I feel like so many of us as women who have gone through the process of having children and taking those leaves from our career and then essentially feeling like you're either reintroducing yourself again, or being perhaps in a different position altogether, or perhaps making a completely decision like you did. And I did the exact same thing as well, where you're sort of deciding that, okay, there's maybe something else here for me. But I think that's often not, I think the stress, and I don't want to use the word trauma lightly, but just the feeling of having to rebuild something that you've spent so much time building, I don't think that that is a light decision for anybody. And I think
Mhm.
often there's sort of this like, oh, you've had a baby and this is like all really great. But then the actual act of rebuilding and restarting, or a completely new career, that takes a lot of courage, and that takes a lot of like mental mindset of figuring out sort of what this new path is. And you have this beautiful sort of journey that you've been through in regards to kind of making that maybe a clearer path
Mm.
for people, not just women. But I think women specifically are the ones that kind of are the ones that have stayed home. And not to say that men don't, because we shared a little bit of our maternity paternity leave as well with our kids, but it kind of falls on us to have to make those big decisions, since most of, like, we're the ones that the baby is like, they're there, like we have to deal with this all.
Yeah.
And I think that's really brave. And I think that a lot of women maybe feel like, oh, I should just be okay with this because this is just the way that it goes. But it's not. It's a big decision. And I think that leaves us almost more susceptible to getting ourselves into places in our career or business further down the road that we're like, wait a second, is this really what I want to be doing? Or was there this maybe pressure on the circumstance around it all where I kind of felt like I didn't really have a choice? Now what?
Yeah. Oh, I think that's so true. And I know for me, it was my decision to leave the organization, and one that had treated me so well and that I loved, but I completely underestimated what that would do to my image of myself. And
Mm.
so,
I just
here
got
I
goosebumps
was,
you saying that.
yeah, like, so here I was at home, with, a 3-year old and, a 6 months old at that point in time, I think. And, I really had to dive deep to figure out, who am I outside of the role, the title, the legitimate authority that I had, and how I thought people perceived me. And, I
Mhm.
really struggled with that for the first few years. Um, so yeah, it was a really interesting season of life to go through. But in the midst of all that, I was completely kind of free of any obligations outside of, being a mom, whatever that looked like. And I'll be honest, my daughter went to daycare. Most days we were paying for it to keep our spot. And she was happier there with the other kids than, puttering around with
Mhm.
me at home for the most part. So, so I had a fair bit of freedom just to kind of dive into whatever came
Mhm.
my way. But yeah, it was a really interesting and, to be honest, kind of like a tough season of life.
Well, yeah, and I feel like when you mix postpartum with like all that's going on with that, mixed with making big decisions, like it's not for the faint of heart. Like this is a lot going on with when you're thinking about finances, when you're thinking about managing your children, when you're thinking about what you want for yourself, like you said, and
Mhm.
that's a good thing to know what we want for ourselves. But I think we often feel selfish when
Yeah.
we're thinking about what we want for ourselves. And you have this beautiful phrase that you use um, called guilt free, living with guilt free confidence. And I love it because I think so many of us, and I'm saying this to myself, live in this constant state of guilt without meaning to. We're
Yeah.
guilty when we're with our kids. We're guilty when we're working. We're guilty when we're doing this because of whatever else we're not doing, rather than allowing ourselves to just live confidently wherever we are in that spot, and knowing that the perception of whatever our kids or anybody else might think in a situation is actually just stuff we're saying in our own heads. It's not the reality of the situation most of the time. So, how has your journey, as you've worked yourself through, obviously your children are not little anymore, so you've worked your way through this over the years. how has your journey led you to creating this new program that I want you to talk about here, My Personal Vision, which I had the pleasure of being a beta tester for, which is why I'm even more excited to hear about this, because I've gotten to experience it firsthand, and I cannot wait for you to share this with the world.
Thank you. Yeah, it was one of those things that really wasn't, it wasn't on my radar up until COVID hit. So I love strategic planning. That is where my bucket overflows.
My love language, strategic planning.
Yes, Pilates, my morning latte, and strategic planning. Those are my love languages. Anyway, so COVID hit and nobody was doing strategic planning. Everybody, the world stopped and moved to survival mode. Nobody was gathering in groups. So there were some projects that people decided to do kind of modified online versions, but it's not the same. Like you can still get some good results, but it's not the same as carving out a day to be with a group of people and really dive into some important questions and get clarity and alignment and a sense of direction. So anyways, in the midst of that season, I, was trying to survive with my husband who had moved to working from home. And I realized as much as he's an introvert, he is very loud.
We could have a whole nother episode.
Oh my gosh.
How we survived working from home with our spouses.
Anyways, now I said, if you go back to the office full time, I might go through separation anxiety. So I've kind of come full circle, but he's kind of half in the office, half working from home. But anyway, so between him being home and the two kids and kind of the drama of, is there curriculum? Is there not curriculum? Are they at school? Oh, no, now they're back at home. It was just mad chaos. And I'm sure every household, whether you had children, whether you had, significant others, like the world was in a state of chaos. And so I really took that time to say, okay, well, if I can't do the things that I love, how can I use my time in a way that will prepare me for whatever comes next, in a way that will, renew my sense of energy. And I love, one of my values is growth and constantly choosing to learn. So for me, that's a source of energy, is taking on learning opportunities. And so I ended up doing a number of facilitation courses. And so I've been doing facilitation for over a decade, but actually, doing some investing in bettering and equipping myself with new techniques. And through the midst of one of them was kind of a special model that this organization had created around strategic planning. And the homework of that was using this process on yourself. Anyway, so I went through that, and, I did my homework over, the couple nights while this particular course was going on. But then after the course ended, I kept going back and refining and editing and saying, oh, but if I just asked myself this question and dove into this, and, I really think I need to think about that. Anyways, fast forward, it kind of morphed into a step-by-step process to apply the benefits of strategic planning to the human level. So something that would give me a sense of direction on what is important in my life. How do I, what underpins my decision making, and, how do I know that to be true? So really looking at what are those values that guide my life based on the decisions and the statements of belief that I have had over my 40 some years on this planet. And then really looking, there's the one part that, and I think you can attest to this, was going through the section on obstacles and really understanding what is holding me in my current patterns that's stopping me from getting to where I want to be. And I think it just opened up so much stuff for me in a way that I had never really considered before. And so I left that process thinking this was revolutionary. And I am someone who has tried to do strategic planning on myself, with myself.
It's a skill you already possess. Yeah.
and I've tried many different ways and attempts, but they always fell flat. And, they always ended up being an exercise that was an investment of time, but didn't have the longevity to actually propel me forward in any meaningful way. Whereas, this process was like, wow, I have a whole new outlook on life. I have a whole new sense of purpose and of clarity. And in the midst of that, it was so freeing at giving this guilt-free confidence because I knew what was important. I was intentional in that pursuit. So it became so much easier to say yes to things that aligned and no to things that didn't. And now the world has kind of opened up a little bit again, and corporate strategic planning has started to, I was so busy this fall. It was like the floodgates opened.
Yes.
So I kind of am just like overwhelmed really at a personal note of what this opened up for me. And, maybe you can share a little bit about your experience.
When you were just talking about the obstacles piece, like, we had this moment while we were working through the course together, and I'm going to link this in the show notes so that people can look into this to see if they feel like this would be a fit for them, because I'm the same as you, where I feel like I do spend a lot of time on personal growth. I do spend a lot of time, money, effort on trying to do the things in my life that are going to make me feel my best, and to dig into the uncomfortable places in my life where I know that work needs to be done, especially if something is triggering me or something is happening. I really like to dive into that rather than avoid what's going on. And that's always been my personality. But like you said, this was taking it to a different level. This was something, and I think the same as you, like, I've always tried to do this, not just on my own, like I've like worked through it with like programs and different things and like therapy and like all kinds of stuff, but often I am sort of like self-guiding it a little bit, and realized how powerful it is when you actually have somebody with a fresh set of eyes and a fresh perspective. Where for me, the big breakthrough happened while taking this course, was being able to actually verbally talk that through with you, like being able to actually have somebody who is in tune with it themselves, first of all, because I think that it takes a lot of work. And I think a lot of us are often scared of that work, of what maybe would come up from those things, because it's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But working through it with someone who has worked through it themselves also added to it feeling more comfortable, because I'm like, listen, this is going to be uncomfortable, but it can't get better until you work through the uncomfortable stuff. So I'm either going to stay in this stuck place, or I'm going to be okay with it being a little bit more uncomfortable, because it's already uncomfortable a little bit. So why don't we just go all the way and realize how much clarity and freedom, which again, I think a lot of times when you are coming up with boundaries or values or any of those sorts of types of things, I think a lot of times we have this mindset that means it's limiting. Like we're limiting ourselves. Like that's going to actually cause more restriction in our life or cause more issues. I don't know what, but oh my gosh, the opposite is what actually happens when you dig through it in a way, once you've actually worked all the way through it. I think sometimes we get to that stuck place and then we wonder why we're still not feeling that freedom, but it's because we actually haven't gone all the way through yet to the other side of getting to that freedom, realizing that the values and the boundaries, like you said, are actually unto itself creating that freedom, because it removes that decision fatigue from every single decision that you're trying to make in your life and business.
Yeah, I think that's so true. And, when you think about one of the key pieces of strategic planning is having a clear vision, which is, what's your destination? Where are you headed? What does that ideal future look like? And so when you know that, you can be really intentional about what things align to that when you're adjudicating, how am I going to spend my time? How am I going to spend my energy? How am I going to spend my money? And then the next step is that, okay, so what's holding me back from living out that vision that I've said is where I want to be? And, I remember when we were going through this, I used the analogy of, peeling back the layers of the onion. And it's so easy, I think, for us to get that first, maybe that second layer off the onion, because it's like, okay, this is the obvious stuff. But sometimes it's not the root cause isn't always that obvious stuff. It's something that when you go through the questions and say, okay, well, there seems to be a sense of guilt in that answer. So what's beneath that guilt? And,
Yes.
a lot of people will respond, in ways of saying, oh, well, I have a lack of time, or, a lack of money. And it's like, okay, well, so what's beneath that?
Yes.
What underlies the fact that you think you have no money or no time, or, a lack of something that's preventing you from overcoming this? And, when you peel back and peel back and peel back, then all of a sudden it's like this major aha moment. And sometimes it's the craziest, simplest thing that are actually at the root of that. But once you can acknowledge it and then say, okay, now what am I going to do about these things?
Yes.
Whether it's setting clear boundaries, whether it's, putting an action plan in place to overcome. Sometimes it requires, being very specific about steps to overcome something. Once you know what it is you need to overcome, that then all of a sudden this sense of my ideal future is so much more tangible, because you're not caught in that pattern of, well, I said that's important, but I just can't seem to get any traction to move towards it. And it's kind of that like rat race, spinning of the wheels concept. And so it was so neat when you were willing to walk through this in one of our live sessions.
Just full on ugly crying, full on ugly crying.
Well, it is one of those things that, I think people hearing this might say, oh, good Lord, that is so not my cup of tea.
Yeah.
And how this is organized is, a small group that breaks out into partners. And then, in your case, you came back from one of the breakout sessions and, said like, I can't seem to get to the bottom. And, I threw out an invitation.
Yes, there was no pressure whatsoever on this. Like, I would have not had to share this. And I think that's what I loved about the group too. Like, I am a sharer, but nobody else wanted to do this. And that was perfectly just as wonderful. Like, they were working through it in their own way, but I was like, nope, this isn't working. I need to be able to share this. And the fact that that opportunity was allowed in there made it feel like, okay, this group can work for anyone, no matter what their personality is. You don't wish to share, you don't. You wish to share, you can share and process it in the way that yourself processes things, and being willing to step out of your comfort zone a little bit. Because I didn't know the people in the group either. I knew them in the group, but didn't really know them outside of this either. So it wasn't like they were like my people that I was like in this group with, and I appreciated that invitation was there as we worked through this stuff, because I wouldn't have believed the aha moments that came from it if I hadn't experienced it myself. Like, it's almost like, did that actually really happen?
Yeah. And you went through some pretty major changes in what you were choosing to invest your time and energy in.
It pivoted my entire career. Honestly, I have made so many big decisions during the pandemic because of going through this course, which even being a fairly self-aware person, I wouldn't have necessarily thought that I needed to kind of work through as much as I did. But I was like, woo, this is going to the places, like you're saying, that weren't just the first and second layers. This was taking it all the way through. And I felt like I really was able to work through that whole entire process and make big changes. And that has been like so incredible in my life, because it's just brought so much clarity to other areas, and then being able to use that system again when other stuff comes up.
Yeah. I think that's a really interesting part. Strategic planning, whether you're doing it as an organization, a team, or an individual, it's not an exercise that's meant for the time that you're doing it. Like, I mean, you get benefits while you're living and breathing and going through the process, but strategic planning by nature is really intended to be, a living, evolving plan. that when things change in your life, you go back and reevaluate and say, okay, well, this just happened. COVID shut down the world. What am I going to choose to do? Does that impact my ability to move forward in what I've said was important and what I'm moving towards?
Yes.
And if so, okay, so what do I need to go back and change? So it's really designed to equip people with that process and the tools that they get benefit while they're going through the program, but it also enables them to keep it a living, breathing engagement,
because
right?
Don't you find, I was talking about this, I actually had a conversation this week with somebody where we were talking about how in life and business, doesn't matter where, most things aren't actually an emergency, but we make them an emergency because we aren't equipped in the moment to process change. And I think if we've learned anything specifically in these last 2 years, that sort of, and not saying anything is or isn't an emergency, everybody can determine for themselves what that is for them. But if we actually are the definition of an emergency, like a life or death situation, something like immediate that is going to be catastrophic if it happens, we often make fairly basic things in our life feel and get our body's nervous system going in a sense that it is an emergency. I do this regularly and have actively worked since coming through this program to determine how to actually have these, whether a decision is big or small, they can all benefit from a methodical process that ends up feeling like a habit rather than defaulting to chaos. I don't know what to do. This is such, how come this happened? Why me? Like we all just go into spirals about it rather than, okay, this happened. It's okay to feel all the feelings about it. You can be mad, sad, angry, frustrated, and all of the things. But then let's work through this in a way that's actually like, you know what? This is happening, whether we want it to or not. And how are we going to work and use this for good, even if it feels like garbage right now? You have a really good example of this in your own life, because I think I'm imagining there's a lot of people listening to this right now where they're like, oh, this all sounds fine and wonderful, but like, how does this actually work in my real life? That's always the questions I'm asking when I'm hearing things like this, where you're like, okay, like this sounds like a perfect world scenario of, oh, good, every decision I'm ever going to make is going to be really easy and whatever.
Yeah.
But that's the beauty of this, is that when you actually take the time to go through the work and do it once, it can make the rest of the decisions that you're making that easy. It doesn't mean they're not going to be hard. It's still going to be hard, but you have the tools rather than feeling like you're just flailing around trying to decide what to do next. So you've worked through this yourself, / you have this course that you're teaching people how to do this. And then you've had experiences that have come up in your own life recently where you've had to make some decisions and actually use your own teachings to work through them.
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
So true. Okay. So this past fall, as I'm gearing up to put all the finishing pieces on the next iteration of this course, and I get approached by a headhunter. And, at first it was like, oh, wow, that feels really good. And normally, my response would be, I'm not really looking for anything different. I love what I'm doing. But in the initial greeting, I was provided with a job description for the specific role. And I start reading it. And I am left saying, this job was written for me. It had everything I love doing, everything my background in business, in strategic planning, in governance was exactly, as if I had written a job description for myself. And so then I thought, holy, I need to just think this through before saying, no, I'm not interested. And so there were a number of conversations that, kind of these discovery type conversations. And the more I thought about it, I was left saying, well, this is either the world's biggest distraction or it is a divine intervention for a major shift in my life. But I went back through what I knew about myself in terms of what is my why and how does this job fit in with that, and ironically, it was very clearly aligned with my why statement, what brings meaning in my life from a work perspective. But it was really when I started looking at what are the values that I operate and base my decisions on. And when I looked at what did I say was my ideal future, and when I kind of put, money opportunities aside, the social good part aside, it really said, well, this would be a complete disruption to my life. And am I willing to do that? And it really came down to saying, no, it doesn't make sense because it doesn't align with my personal values, and at face level, the values of this organization are very noble, are very honorable, but they're not the values that guide my life and how I make decisions. And so for me, then it became very clear to say, I really appreciate you thinking of me, but this isn't, this doesn't make sense. And we kind of went our own ways, but it was a real life example of, in this case, I wouldn't say being thrown a lemon, but being thrown a potential really good opportunity where, I was caught off guard. It was felt like it was custom written for me and would have been, a great career and personal growth opportunity. But at the end of the day, it didn't fit with what I felt brings meaning to my life and what I said is included in my ideal future. And so then it was like, okay, I don't have to worry about, did I make the wrong decision?
Yes.
And, wearing all of that, what's it going to say about me if they came to me and I say no, all of those things that get caught up in our brain, that you can rationalize, but it's hard sometimes to make those voices stop.
Yes.
But it just was so clear when I evaluated it against my vision and what underpins that vision. It's like, no, thank you, but it's not right.
Yes. Well, and such a good example too of, I think that's often sometimes the decisions that become even trickier is the ones that seem like, for decisions that come up where it's like, seems fairly like drastic, maybe would be the word of like, oh yeah, this definitely doesn't fall in, like, sure, this is here, but this doesn't fall into what I'm choosing. Doesn't necessarily still make it easy to say no to something. You still might need to work that through, but you kind of know firsthand what your gut's telling you. But in a decision like this, where it does fall so closely to that, it's not unless you've done the work to feel so clear about what your values are. And for you, like you said, there wasn't anything in particular about it that didn't match with what was going on, but you knowing that you've made the decision that your family schedule looks like this in this season, that your life looks like this in this season. And okay, this doesn't have the flexibility that requires for this, which would throw all kinds of other things off in your life. Therefore, perfect. Okay, done. This could have been a great opportunity and I would have considered yes, but not in this season. And then, like you said, confidently feeling like you can move forward. And I think that's the piece that gives us the biggest freedom, is the not wavering afterwards of, oh, should I have done this? Did I make the wrong decision? And that's what going through your course has given me. I am a very quick decision maker. And that has sometimes been a negative thing in my life because I haven't necessarily used the process. I'm just like, I trust my gut and my instinct so fiercely, but that has sometimes left me wondering, oh, like maybe I should have thought about this a little bit further and really measured this to something rather than just like, yes, no. And I respect people so much whom, even when they're not giving me the answer that I want, whom are confident in the answer that they are giving me. I'm reaching out to them about something, whatever that may be in life or in business. Actually, you know what? That's not going to work for me. And because I'm confident in my own values, I don't take that personally then. It's given me the confidence for other people's as boundaries to not be my problem. They can have whatever they need to work. And it's fine that what they're doing doesn't work for me. That's not their problem. That's on me to kind of figure that part out. And so that's been really interesting to kind of work through that process as well, which leads me I feel like we always are looking for practical ways to kind of implement these things. Cause sometimes I think a lot of us maybe feel like this is an all or nothing. You're like, okay, I completely have to revamp my whole entire life and every single thing I know about making a decision or
Yeah.
figuring out what's right for me. But I think knowing the baby steps can make that feel a little bit more comfortable, as people might dip their toe into this and then decide,
Mm.
yeah, I do want to actually figure this out for myself. I do see the value in investing in a course that would help me understand myself so well that I'm going to take away years of decision fatigue because I now have the steps in place. So, what would you say to listeners who are like, yeah, this is intriguing, but how do I actually take these first little steps to kind of decide if this might be right for
Yeah.
me?
Yeah. Well, I'll break it into a couple of thoughts. The first one is, it is so important to have a sense of what brings meaning in your life. So you hear people like Simon Sinek say, from a business perspective, what's your why?
Yeah.
And I've watched his videos and I quite admire him. But I've thought, okay, well, that's great, but how in the heck do you get to that
Yes.
answer? And
Yes.
I spent a ton of time researching and figuring out, for myself, how do you get to that answer? And really what I landed on is needing to be clear on what are your talents, those things that you're really good at doing, your
Mhm.
skills, your interests. What are your passions, the things you love, the things that from an energy standpoint fill up your bucket, and then also the inverse of that. What are the things that deplete you?
Drain. Yes.
And they can be physical things, they can be social things, they can be work related tasks. But just being mindful of, when you go through the course of a week, just, keep a little diary of what are the things that raise your energy levels and what are the things that, deplete them. And it's really shocking, but simple, but super helpful. So that's the second piece. You've got your talents, your loves, and then looking at kind of from a purpose standpoint, what are those things that, when you look at, why are these things important to me? And I like to use the lens of, kind of these 8 different realms of wellness, that you can look at from areas of intention in your life. So everything from, a financial perspective, a vocation or work perspective, a faith perspective, a social, a physical, environmental, meaning like your surroundings. And, so you look at all of those things, and they have to be rooted and aligned with your value system. What are those things that guide your decision making? And I've been through a lot of different courses on, how do you determine your values? And there are a lot of different tools out there. I've built something that I think takes it a fair bit deeper than the other tools that I've used in the past, which really, mapping out those defining moments in your life, and then looking at, okay, well, what did you tell yourself in those moments?
Mhm.
And then, what of those kind of internal messages to yourself, which ones of those have been reinforced time over time? Things like, okay, to be successful in this situation, I need to be, or I need to do something. And then, those become statement of beliefs, and the statement of beliefs that are reinforced over time become your values.
Yes.
And, those values then really, when you look back at your journey and your history, say, yeah, that is how I have made decisions in my past,
Mhm.
right or wrong. This is what has underpinned them. So when you look at all of that together, it gives you a much clearer picture of what brings meaning in your life. And so when you're clear on that, and I don't think it's a one thing, I think a lot of times people are expecting this, epiphany to come in this moment, in this dream, in this, like, quiet time of daydreaming, pondering. Oh, it just, like, the light bulb goes off and this is my purpose. I really take a different approach. And that is, how do I bring meaning to the things that I'm choosing to spend my time and energy on, which means you need to be intentional about where you're spending your time, and then be clear on what is the fruit you're choosing to bear from that investment? And how does that connect with your value system, what you bring as a person into those situations? So all of that, there are so many different pieces in there that
Yes.
people could dive into. Just the simple one is really being mindful and over the course of a week, writing down what fills my bucket, what drains my bucket in,
Yes.
everything from the types of food I eat to, getting
Yes.
enough sleep, to the type of interactions you have with people, to the tasks and, what work looks like to you, what pieces of work, whatever you do, whether it's at your house, in an office, working from home, volunteering, whatever it is, being clear and then thinking about, okay, how can I do more of the stuff that fills me up and less of the stuff that depletes me?
Yes.
So that, kind of is that first bit on really understanding your purpose, which from a corporate perspective is getting clear on what your mission is.
Yes.
So that's kind of one element and one angle you can look at it. And there are so many different pieces that you could take on, on your own for that. And then the next piece is on the vision. What's your forward looking, that ideal future, and spending some time thinking about, what that looks like. What do you want to be included in that vision? And again, it doesn't have to be a solitary focus. I don't think any of us work in like such a zone where there's only one happy future.
Yes, totally.
It includes so many different things because we're complex and we have so many different elements of what makes us us. And so in this program, there's a very robust process to get you from kind of a brainstorming into clarity at the end. But if somebody wanted to, dabble, I think it just starts by thinking about, what do I want to see in my future?
Yes.
What are some of those things?
And the new year is such a cliche time, but nonetheless, such a time of, we've just come through the holidays and all of the things, and are probably ate too much, drank too much, doing all the things, so aren't feeling our best.
Yeah.
But New Year always has such a new feel, fresh start to it, that I think it's such an amazing time of year, if you haven't already done that, to kind of just reevaluate. And I always really like to look back. I started doing this a couple of years ago. I look back at my calendar, because that's where like my life lives, is in my calendar. And I just look kind of just at a glance, day by day. And it doesn't need to be like a long thing, but just kind of like swiping through the calendar and looking through, what did I fill my time with in the last year?
Yeah.
And where am I landing right now on how I felt the last year was, if I was going to rate the year, and looking through all the activities, the things, the work, like your meetings are in there, your family stuff is in there, like all of the things, not that every piece of your life is in there. I keep a lot of my life in my Google Calendar, so it's fairly explanatory as to what it's very robust. But it's kind of a neat way to sort of, at a glance, be able just to see where I was spending my time, and how did I feel about that? Like, it's kind of like a kickstart for me, versus just sort of sitting with a blank journal and being like, what's this looking like? For me, that kind of triggers the thought process of then writing things down in the journal, being like, wow, I had too many meetings. I probably need to figure out how that could be a piece where I maybe have more available time, and I'm not always in meetings, or whatever the case may be, right? And that for me has been a really interesting and eye-opening process, because I always feel sometimes like I have a handle on it, but then when you're actually looking through it, you're like, maybe this isn't quite as balanced as I thought that it would be. And your exercise of kind of writing that down as a starting point is such a good place to just get that initial jump start on clarity of like, but if I actually want to feel different this year, something has to be different. I can't expect to keep doing the exact same thing. Definition of insanity, right? Doing the exact same thing and expecting a different result. And I love how you have that broken down in such a basic yet robust, like the word you use, process of like, it's simple. It's not like this is hard work in a sense of hard, but mentally you have to be willing to work through some of this stuff, and then you'll really reap the rewards.
Yeah, it's really a process of inquiry, a process of reflection, and then, a process of, a little bit of, I don't like using the word dreaming because it sounds a little bit fluffy, but really thinking about the future and kind of tying all of those intentions together. And I think, the new year is, you're right. It is that season where I always look at January and September are my reset seasons, right?
Mm-hmm.
When the kids go back to school, that's kind of my first reset of yay, back to a schedule. I love a schedule. And I think why I love that is because it brings clarity in my life that I know what's going on. And January it just is that natural time of reflecting and saying, okay, what's working, what isn't working, what do I want to do differently? And I think what makes this January different than some in the past is that after this long, drawn out season of like all the ups and downs in the world of COVID, so many people are, feeling this overwhelm. And, burnout is it's a word that gets used so often. And I think it is a reality for so many people. Some of us don't want to admit it because, that word might have some stigmas around it, but really it's that like chronic feeling of fatigue and, relentless stress that has us in a place where we're just not working at our best in any facet of life. And sometimes that just requires a reset. And, I think a reset is best done when you can be really intentional about what you're saying yes to and what you're saying no to.
Yes. And recognize that with the hard work, change will come. It might not be in the form that you are thinking now it's going to come, but it's going to come one way or the other. And you will get out of that stuck process if you put in the work. 100% guaranteed. That is a guarantee.
Yeah.
When you're willing to put in the work, right?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Merin, this is a topic that I could talk for endless hours for. We will have you on again as another segment because I know that this is going to be stirring in the Celebrating Simple Life community of people talking about how they are ready to not feel stuck anymore and to feel so clear on what brings them joy. And you know me, I love that topic. So before we leave today, of course, we have to ask you a few rapid fire questions. So are you ready?
Yes.
Okay. Fill in the blank. I wish I knew.
Oh, can I say two people? The first person that comes to my mind is Oprah. And I'll be honest, I wasn't I didn't watch a lot of Oprah, but I just think she speaks with such poise and such
Did you see her
conviction.
live when she came to Canada?
No, I didn't.
It was so good. It was so good.
I just think she has such a fascinating story of overcoming and, resetting and bringing inspiration and positive, like those tough but positive conversations.
And she was like doing it before it was a thing.
Yeah.
That's always what I admire about her.
Yeah.
Like, it's like, not that it still isn't hard, but it's way more widely acceptable, I think, in this day and age to like kind of just be yourself, say it like it is. Not that that still doesn't make it hard, but in her day and age and working through everything else with the things that she had going on in her life, like, wow, I agree.
Yeah. I think she just, to me was someone who speaks with love and grace and kind of knows where that perfect balance is of honesty.
She clearly has worked through her boundaries so crystal clear. You're like, wow,
so she would be my first, and then I mentioned Simon Sinek. I just think, he just has so much wisdom. And he speaks more from a business perspective, but so much stuff applies to our lives as individuals. So he would be my runner-up.
Those are good. Good. What scares you?
Oh, honestly, the biggest thing that scares me is something tragic happening to one of my kids. Yeah. And I've found in life, that fear, which is not rational. And I know that, but it can drive me to really have emotional outbursts that are very irrational, for fear of,
just coming from that place of fear.
Yeah, rooted in that fear. And I think, I mean, you know my story, but my older sister passed away in a car accident when I was 19. And so I think it has, I can tie it back to that season of life and the impacts of that on me as a person and on our family. And I know it's not logical, but yeah, that would be kind of the single biggest fear I would.
Yeah, those are big. Okay, a lighter question, especially as we've just come off of the holidays. What is your favorite meal?
Oh, this one is easy. King crab legs.
Oh,
like I don't even need any sides. Skip the salad, skip the starch, just
a nice bib. Just a nice bib.
A big old bib, some warm butter, and a lot of lemon. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Yum. We need to have a seafood night.
Yeah. Usually our New Year's Eve, we have a big seafood feast, and crab legs, usually king crab, is on that list. My husband is the chef in our household, and he treats me to that on.
That sounds amazing. Like, will you maybe find me creeping on your front steps? Sure, maybe. We'll see. Yeah.
Come on over.
Okay, what was the last television series that you binged through and loved?
Oh, okay. Well, I'll share the one that I'm watching right now, and I'm not really a binge watcher.
I know you're not.
It's not really my thing, but I do enjoy a good series, but I am totally okay. I like to savor it.
I do too. I'm the same way. I'm not a binge watcher either. Like everyone's like, oh, I stayed up till 3 a.m. I'm like, what? My bedtime is 9:30 or 10 o'clock.
I know,
How do you do this?
I have a very clear boundary around sleep. It is very important to me. I do not operate well on.
No one wants to see that. No one needs to see that.
Definitely not. And so usually, it's trying to find a series that Andrew, my husband, and I can watch and enjoy together. And we got onto one called Ted Lasso on Apple TV.
Okay, I'm hearing everybody talking about this, but I haven't watched it yet.
Oh my gosh, it is so flippin' funny. It is just like, I don't know, to watch a show and hear a person you really love and care about, like full on belly laugh. And my husband's a pretty serious guy, so getting to see him laugh, like it is just so contagious. And it's kind of based on a sports, it's this like Southern US coach who, as a spoof, gets imported into England to coach their football team. Kind of as a joke, because the lady who now owns the team wants to screw her ex-husband and and push the team to the ground. But anyways, the humor in it is just so funny. And for me, I like watching TV shows that are light, that just let my brain just be. I don't need to watch a documentary that makes me think. Like, I do enough thinking in my daily world. I just want something that gets me out of my own head and can laugh. So anyways,
adding it to my list. Definitely. I love it. Okay. What is on your night table?
Oh my gosh. Well, it needs a good cleaning right now. I
don't believe it.
Oh, you would be shocked. Actually, you would really be shocked. So of course there's a lamp, and there's my alarm clock, which is like projects on the ceiling. My Apple Watch, which is actually what wakes me up in the morning. And then I usually have a few books. So I always try to read for a few minutes before bed, just to clear my head. So I, usually read something from the Bible before I go to bed. I've got my 5-minute journal that a dear friend gave me, and it is, love it. I don't do it every day, and it's meant to do some in the morning, some at night. But I kind of do it all at night. And so that is on there. And then usually like a food and wine magazine or something, if I just want a lighter.
I love it.
And usually a bit of dust. There's a bit of dust on there too.
We got to keep it real. Honestly, that is a definite addition to my night table.
But nobody sees my bedroom. So it's kind of the last it's clean. It's tidy. It just doesn't get the thorough clean.
Yes,
that the rest
totally.
of the house does.
You're like, you're
Yeah.
not eating off your night table. You're like, well,
No,
that's fine.
no, so true.
Okay, last question. What are some or one simple moment, day-to-day life that brings you the most joy?
Oh, for me, something I do every single day is take my dog for, I would say a walk, but realistically it's multiple walks. And that is it's my meditation time. It's my prayer time. I'm sure people would think I'm a bit wacky because, I often talk under my breath.
Yes.
It's just
Yeah.
Cito, our little double doodle, and I ripping down the trails. But that is my kind of recharge. It's my
Yes.
get clear if there's something bugging me and my thoughts are just stuck on something, we'll just go for a walk. And so
Yes.
that is my happy moment. I do really try to do Pilates a number of times per week, so that, love it, but it's not necessarily something I do every single day.
Yeah, I love it. Oh my goodness. Merin, thank you so much for sharing so openly today. I am just so grateful to have been a part of not only just being your friend for many, many years, but also getting to be a part of this program that is going to change lives, and it has changed mine. And thank you for just sharing the background about it today and how it's changed your life too. So thank you for being on the show today. You are a gem.
Oh, thanks, Kim.